Hi and welcome to this week's Retvlog. Remember, there's a new Retribution Paladin video every week, whether it be a guide or a discussion, something like this. And what I want to talk about today is on that subject. There's a lot of misinformation, which I'm trying to talk about this before. It's very difficult to get things quite right when classes are being developed through an alpha and a beta. But my particular gripe for the start of this video is going to be people who deliberately get it wrong. They're not making mistakes, they're deliberately getting it wrong and misinforming you. And I also want to go through some Q&As. There were some questions that arose from my video last week as well. So really the theme here are the dangers of misinformation and the difficulties of getting it right. Legion removed the concept of BIS lists. I mean, there was a time a few years ago you would just say when you want to learn a new class, okay, what's my BIS list? What are my BIS stats? What's, my rotation? Thanks very much, right, I'll go away and do that. Doesn't really work like that anymore. Legion removed those, the BIS list because of Titan Forging. Priority, BIS stats, no. For Ret Paladins at any rate, no. And BFA is stripping away another layer of uniformity. So we already had in Legion a situation where I had to try and persuade people to sim themselves. What's going to be better for me? Well, you need to sim yourself, for gear at least, and for stats. Now it's going to be the case, potentially even for talents, and maybe even the priority system, the APL, with the rotation, can depend on various things as well, if you really want to get down to the nth degree. And I'm going to be talking a little bit of detail again about Hammer of Wrath, because it's a funny bunny at the moment. But Skeletor, who is one of the senior theory crafters, I mean, this is the thing about, developing classes as well and really understanding how a class works. For each class and spec, there will be a very, very small number of people who really know what's going on, because things change a lot through the alpha and beta, and they're doing a lot of work on whenever anything changes, as has happened this build, for example. Trying to first of all get the Simcraft module working right. They're trying to make sure that their model fits what they see in game. That can take some time because Blizzard don't, provide a lot of information. Sometimes if there's a query, oh, is this supposed to be working like that? They're actually pretty good because it's in Blizzard's interest that, we are on the same platform there, sort of confirming or denying that a particular thing is supposed to work that way. But ultimately, what these theory crafters have to do is to try and make sure that their model fits what they're seeing in the game. Once it does, and it can take some time for that to happen, once it does, then it's a case of saying, okay, so what's this going to mean? What's it going to mean for the relative strength of these talents, these abilities? What order should we do things in? What are our stats looking like? And you can start to then pick away at the greater detail. But you get a lot of people, and Skeletor has been looking at Ret videos. He still searches every day for people doing Ret videos on BFA. And he gave me a list of some of the worst offenders for just getting things mindlessly wrong. Now, what I'm not going to pick on, because I'd be a terrible hypocrite for doing it, is someone who gets something a little bit wrong in a video, especially if it's counterintuitive. I mean, I do that, but the key difference really is that I am talking to these theory crafters. If I'm not sure about something, I ask. And if I do get something wrong, I update. And that's the key thing, so that eventually when I do my sort of main guide, it will be as accurate as it can possibly be, because apart from anything else, I will have other people check it out. So what I'm not talking about are people who, play Retribution Paladin, have gone into the beta or the alpha, looking at the differences and doing a video on what they see as the differences. We're not going to have a query about that. And even if something is wrong, some of those things can be understandable. What the beef is, my real beef is, two main things. First of all, people who are making zero efforts to have any sort of validity to it. They're claiming it's a guide. So immediately if you claim something's a guide, then you need to have gone to some efforts to make sure it's accurate. If you're just saying, oh, this is what I feel about it, okay. But if you say, no, this is the way it is, then you need to be accurate. And some of these people, I mean, you know, I've watched some of these videos myself as far as I can get through them. Skeletor's been pretty good. And he's done a video actually addressing a lot of the misconceptions. I'm going to put a link in the description below so you can check that out as well. But I've been struggling through some of them. And there's a few things that really irk me. One is where they say, okay, this is how it's working in BFA and this is how it's working in Legion. So there's a difference. And I'm thinking, no, that's not how it even works in Legion. It did work in Legion like that a year ago or a year and a half ago or in the last Legion beta. So these are people who maybe pottered about on that spec a year or 2 years ago and don't realise that it actually changed. So that's really annoying. In fact, that's what some people will know almost exactly 2 years ago when Legion was about to launch, and obviously they were producing their guides, me included, and Icy Veins produced one, but it was written by people who weren't playing it on the alpha or the beta. They just weren't playing it in there. They just wrote it. They got so many things wrong. They even got the mastery wrong. You know, it was a complete shambles, and I properly tore into it. As a result, Icy Veins within hours were finding someone who had played it to actually do it properly. They found Fardian who agreed to do their Legion guides for them, and then it was much better. So when you've got some of these videos, you look at I've looked at their channels, and it's like the worst things. I mean, I get accused of clickbait sometimes, which is absolutely maddening because I avoid it like the plague. I don't want people watching my videos if they're not going to enjoy it. It's a ball ache having to scroll through, finding sensible comments to reply to. If I have to scroll through the most mindlessly imbecilic, moronic comments to get to them, that's not doing me any favours at all. But anyway, I'm looking at some of these and they're thinking, and they've got them on lots of different classes and specs. And I looked at one particular one, and he was doing it. Says, oh yes, I'm doing this, and there's gonna be a new spec every single day. So stand back a minute and think about that. So someone is going to do a new one of these videos that's telling you everything about the class and spec there, and they're going to do one every single day. Now look at the videos. Look at some of these videos, and you notice a few things. First of all, how's someone doing that? Okay, how is someone going to be able to understand all the subtleties of that class and spec in the beta, especially at this late stage when the classes are basically done now? They're getting ready for tuning. Tuning is in about a week's time, or that's when it's going to start. So how they're doing that, it's not possible. It's not realistically possible. Unless, of course, they're just basically going with a load of questions to someone who does know, and like a journalist, ticking them off. Okay, fine. But are they doing that? No, because you just watch these videos and it's just wall-to-wall crap. And then you look at the video itself. Is it videos of gameplay? I haven't got anything in the background at the moment. I often do. But people know I've been streaming these things, so I've been leveling these things. Be a little bit suspicious if, as I say, one, they're able to do it on every class and spec, and they're basically doing one a day or one every couple of days. Two, if the character that they've got is a level 110. That means they haven't even done any questing on it. They've just created the character. They're reading through the tooltips of the abilities and going, oh yeah, this does this, this does this. Oh yeah, I reckon it's going to be useful for this. Making shit up, and that's it. Buy a training dummy. Occasionally they'll go to a training dummy, hit it a few times, completely the wrong order, but that doesn't matter. I don't care about that. But yeah, just be a bit curious about someone who's producing videos every day of a different class and spec, and their model for doing this, their gameplay, is a level 110 pre-made character that they've just made like 10 minutes before. They're in Orgrimmar or Stormwind, something like that. So they haven't even done the opening scenario. Really? So yeah, just annoys the hell out of me. But the real thing that annoys me is the problem with this is people are watching these videos and then going onto the forums talking about all sorts of shit that completely removes the ability to discuss actual issues. Now, I'm very pleased with what happened with Ret Paladin, but the problem is, as things have gone on, I've become less pleased. It's not that I think it's going to be bad when it goes into BFA, so it's a big improvement on Legion. But all the improvements were made ages ago. We had that thing where the alpha opened up and it was like, ugh. And then Blizzard was saying, we don't really want to change a lot of specs. It's sort of okay. So it was Ret was just basically like it was in Legion. but with all our Azerite, our artifact, traits stripped off. It's horse shit. So, and then a load of things change. It's like, oh my god, this is amazing. But then there hasn't really been anything then. There's been a few refining of things, but there hasn't really been any progress made. And it's been very difficult because we haven't been able to get proper discussions, because people have been focusing on things that are just completely wrong. And as I say, a fault of it is not only forum posts and videos that just telling, and it is deliberate, because if you're going to do one of these guides and you don't play that class or spec, and also bear in mind, some people who even do play it don't necessarily understand it. They have to get guides themselves because they're not talking to theory crafters, they're not doing any theory crafting themselves, So the only way even very good players of a spec will learn is by following someone else's guide. But we're talking the majority of cases, people who don't even play the spec. So if you don't play that class of spec, you've just created it. Maybe you've done a few quests. Maybe some of them put some effort in. It's level 111. And you're going to try and talk about it just by reading the tooltips and then inferring things. It's not that they're deliberately saying something that's wrong, but they are deliberately saying something that they do not know to be true, which amounts to the same thing. They are basically lying for the sake of views on a video to try and build it up. And it proves it's right, because all of these channels there, they do it on all the specs. They get a lot of views because people have this attitude of a one-stop shop. I'll go to the channel that has everything on it. But the problem is, when you go to the channel that has everything on it, in actual fact, you go into the channel that has nothing on it. And that's the issue. But anyway, let's go through some of the common offences, the misconceptions that have come out there, and then I'm going to go through the Q&A from the video from last week. So, I mean, Shield of Vengeance is one that keeps cropping up. So people saying Shield of Vengeance has been nerfed. It's not been nerfed. It's been completely changed the way it works. The amount of damage it will absorb relative to your health pool has been buffed massively. In fact, the only way that Shield of Vengeance in Legion even approaches Shield of Vengeance as it is in BFA is if it crits, because it can crit in Legion. It doesn't really, because it's based on your health pool basically in BFA. So things like, and people are going, oh, versatility is not improving and stuff like that. No, it's not supposed to. It's based on your health now in BFA. And it does about 30% of your health, which is a lot. So actually, as a defensive, it's looking a lot better. But then there's another benefit as well, which is that you don't have to consume the whole shield to get it to blow up. It will blow up. If you do consume it, it will still blow up. But now it's blown up for what would in Legion need to be a crit. In BFA, at the end of its duration, it will blow up for whatever damage it did. Little bit annoying sometimes when you're soloing, because sometimes you've killed the mob, it hasn't expired yet. It expires as you're walking past a neutral mob and you end up doing some damage to it and pulling it. But for raiding and dungeons, this is going to be loads better because you're guaranteed to do some damage with it. Obviously, I'm still not happy with the ability, because you're still going to be encouraged if it's not going to absorb, because the more damage it absorbs, the better. So if you're in a situation where it's only absorbed half the shield, it's got a few seconds left, you're still going to be tempted to stand in bad. Which you might argue, well, what harm does it do if it's just gone into the shield anyway? But of course, when you try and consume the whole shield, you inevitably take a tick once the whole shield has been absorbed as well. So you're still taking a bit of extra damage. Bit naughty, but whatever. Justicar's Vengeance is another one. People still keep talking about this as being in the rotation. When Alpha first came out, there were situations where you could sensibly use it as a damage ability. I talked about that. That has long since ceased to be the case. They never wanted it to be the case. It is an expensive self-heal. That's what it is. Doesn't mean to say it's a useless talent, but what that spell is a heal. If you don't need healing, there aren't realistically situations to use it in. So don't think of it as a damage ability at all. Under any circumstances, there is one tiny little niche situation where you might get somebody it's really not worth it. It's a heal. If you don't need healing, you wouldn't use it. It's not even the heal I'm using myself anyway, because where Justicar's Vengeance is a better heal tends to be in solo content. For solo content, Word of Glory is looking better. Although I'm still miffed that the Word of Glory changes very recently for raiding and particularly for raiding, I should say, but dungeons as well. But now the other thing, one big misconception is to do with downtime. So let's try and get this clear now. So We have more downtime in BFA. It's a deliberate design decision. Coming from Blizzard, not the Ret class designer, coming from more senior designers, the development team there. They want more downtime. Now, I vaguely remember one of the reasons being so we could see ads when they come in on a fight. They felt that we were too involved in our rotations and missed triggers around us on the encounters. That was one of the reasons given. I'm not saying that's the only reason, but I just recall that being one of the reasons that was mentioned in one of the Q&As. So, there's the reason. But whatever it is, we're getting increased downtime. Now, a lot of people going, and when we've got more haste, and as if it goes away. Haste improves the rotation. It always does. It feels better when you've got more haste. But a large reason for that is because when you've got certain abilities, let's say you've got Avenging Wrath up, you can just use more abilities. When you're using execution centers, which is now puts a debuff on it, when you've got the judgment debuff, again, you can use that thing more quickly. Execution centers is more important because that's a window. Much like, execution sentence is very, very similar, I suppose, in some ways to the judgment debuff that we have in Legion. Only, we can't possibly maintain the execution sentence one. So things like that will help because with higher haste, you will be able to fire off more abilities in a set amount of time. But you'll still have basically the same amount of downtime. What people are forgetting, what they're thinking to themselves is, with more haste, my Crusader Strike cooldown is shorter, my Blade of Justice cooldown is shorter, blah, 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 so I can get more abilities in, so I'm not waiting as long. But the issue is that your global cooldown is also reduced by haste. So although your things come off cooldown more quickly, you can fire them off more quickly in sequence as well because of the shorter global cooldown. So the downtime is basically maintained, except in where you've got certain things with fixed system. Like, as I say, it makes it better for execution sentence debuff windows, stuff like that. And in a set amount of time, you will fire off more abilities. But your downtime's still there. You're not getting rid of your downtime by having more haste. That's not going to happen. I suppose there's a situation where you have an astronomical amount of haste and it will start to have some effect, but we're not going to get that. Apart from anything else with secondary stats, I mean, I've been wandering around recently. People who've been watching me stream in the beta will have known that I've been wandering around recently with less than 4% health. And this is after level cap when I've been gearing up. Less than 4%. It's now on about 7%, so, climbing. But we're going to really struggle. And it's not because there isn't a good source of haste specifically, just secondary stats in general. Bear in mind, helms, shoulders, chest, big sources of secondary stats don't have secondary stats. So the Azerite armor does not have secondary stats on them. So, and in theory, of course, Blizzard could compensate elsewhere. They say they're compensating because our Heart of Azeroth has all of them on, all the secondary stats. I don't think it's really compensation. As I say, in the situation I've been now with relatively minor leveling up, I've never had such low haste. I suppose except in WoD. WoD, I remember for most of progress throughout the expansion, I was, on about 5% haste, really, wasn't I? But generally speaking, we have significantly higher values of haste, and it's quite quick to get it as well. Like at the moment, I have about 32% behave yourself, haste in game in Legion. I mean, that's quite recent. But it's not like it's crept up as the expansion's gone on. I very quickly got up to about 22, 23. Right at the start, before I even started raiding, I was on about 22% haste, I think, something like that. Definitely over 20. So it was quite rapid to get a comfortable amount of haste. That's going to be more difficult in BFA. That is going to be a lot more difficult. It's going to be harder to come by your secondary stats realistically. So we're not going to get silly amounts of haste as the way it's looking anyway. The Zeal and Blade of Wrath issue is the final one that I want to talk about. As I say, Skeletor talks about other ones in his video. Again, people just getting this RPPM thing. I tried to tackle that when I did the video on it before as well. People thinking that, because Zeal increases auto attack speed at certain points, that of course is going to increase your RPPM rate. No, it's not supposed to. Now, to be fair, the way RPPM works, I remember when they introduced it, And I remember Blizzard Blues having to clarify quite a lot of the time. So it wasn't straightforward in how it was explained. But basically, it's not supposed to. And it's not just me saying that. The actual class designer, the Ret designer, has actually said. But again, this comes down to the problem that most people don't bother paying attention to what the developers are saying. Has actually said that, no, it's not supposed to do that. However, I think he also did say, but again, things change, so don't, quote me on this one too much. I think he also said that he was okay with a bit of synergy between Zeal and Blade of Wrath, and he might make it so that it, improves the proc rate by about a flat 10% or something. But attack power, increasing your attack speed, increasing your attack speed shouldn't affect that. Haste should affect it, but not attack speed. So there shouldn't be that. And it will be removed. There's been haste mucking about with the way Consecrate works as well. So Consecrate has been doing more damage in the game than it should in theory. When you look at how the spell's supposed to work, it'll still be good. Don't worry. But at the moment, it's doing a bit more just because haste is affecting the ticks when it's not supposed to. So those are the major misconceptions really to get out there. But as I say, the problem with some of these videos, which just need to really go in the bin, are that it's just wall-to-wall nonsense, and they know it's nonsense, and that's what annoys me. They know that they don't know what they're talking about. It's not a mistake because they've said something and then Blizzard's changed something which has affected it. It's not a mistake because something's not intuitive. We're talking about deliberate mistake, one where they just don't know, they're just literally making it up and they know they're making it up, and that just annoys me. And the other thing that annoys me as well, like I on my channel have never deleted a comment. I have banned one person, well, two people from my channel actually. One of them was a student though, I just didn't want him on my channel. But I've basically banned one person for trolling on my channel, and even then I let him talk shit, and I just basically said to him, look, it's going on too much, like, you just keep saying things. Leave it there. I'm not going to say anything else. Leave it there and I'll leave your comments on. But if you say one more thing, I'm just going to ban you, because it was just going on. And he was also attacking other people as well. It was being quite rude. But even then, I was fair and just said, look, I don't like censoring people. Don't like that at all. So, I will always try and leave it up there. But he was stupid enough, shot his mouth off again, so I banned him. But that was the only time, and that was like 2 years ago. Never done it since. So if anyone, by the way, puts a comment on one of my videos and it doesn't appear there, it's not me that's banning it, by the way. That'll be YouTube's automatic systems. Occasionally I will go I don't have a lot of time to go through the ones that have gone into these filters. There's like a spam filter and I can't remember what it even bloody well called. But basically it's for like offensive thingies. They've said a comment that probably breaches YouTube's guidelines. Those ones I tend not to reinstate unless I look at it and think, well, there's nothing really wrong with it, because it's a bit dodgy. I don't want to, because obviously if I then allow those comments, YouTube's looking at my video and going, no, not really suitable, and knocking it down the rankings. So I don't really want to do that on the basis of someone else's comment. So bad language, things like that. The spam one, much less so, but sometimes it is spam, sometimes it isn't. Sometimes people have just posted a link. If I know what the link is or can easily verify it, then I might reinstate it. But again, I'm also a bit nervous about putting links in, unless it's like something like a YouTube link or something like that, where it's But that's the only reason. So if you ever see your comments there, it's not. I have never removed a comment ever. But with some of these videos, when we've actually taken them to task, they've deleted those comments. Because anyone reading those comments knows instantly that they're talking shit, and they don't want to do that. And that's what I mean. If someone accuses me of talking shit, if they're actually right, I'll own up to it. In fact, the mailbox was actually started for that specific purpose, for people who were disagreeing with me, so that I could then, come back and present my point of view. And if actually, they presented a good argument, well, that's the sort of thing I want to put in there. Because I'm secure enough in what I am doing to be fine with people saying, no, you're wrong about something. But these guys if they're going to delete those comments, then that's them basically saying, I don't want people to see that I'm basically a charlatan. Anyway, let's go through some actual things. So Hammer of Wrath, first of all, before I go through the actual questions. So Hammer of Wrath, quite finicky. They've changed it, this build. They've increased the damage, but they've also increased the cooldown on it. So it's like, what is it now? 8 seconds or something from 6 seconds, I think it is. Now, or was it 7.5 seconds? Can't remember exactly. They've increased the cooldown. And the thing is, though, and I know what the problem with it before is that it was non-intuitive. I've talked about this before. You know, lots of people looking at it, as you might, and thinking, what's the point of taking it? Because the whole point of Hammer of Wrath surely is that it's only usable in certain situations. So in those situations, it should be top priority. But its damage was so low, how can it possibly be top priority? Well, the reason was this. It's to do with clashes. So just to explain what a clash is in this particular case. So at a particular point, especially at the start of a fight, you've got, let's say you've got Blade of Justice ready as a Holy Power builder. You've got your Crusader Strike ready. You've got your Judgment ready. Maybe Consecration if you've taken that as well. Wake of Ashes if you've taken that as well. You know, whatever. Obviously, you can't take Wake of Ashes and Consecration. But whichever of those you've taken, you've got a number of things available. So you start using them in a set priority order. Now, ideally what you want to do, it's like spinning plates. You want to keep them all on cooldown. You don't need both charges of your Crusader Strike on cooldown, but at least you want at least one charge. You want all of these abilities to be recharging at all times, because if it's available to use but you're not using it because there's a higher priority one to use, then it's sat there not generating holy power, and that's wasteful. So sometimes the priority is not determined by use your highest damage ability first, then your second highest, and so on. Sometimes it's just to manage those clashes and to reduce the number of them so that you can keep things on cooldown as long as possible, so that whenever it comes off cooldown, it's there to use it quickly, get it back on cooldown and keep going. Because over the course of a fight, or even a minute or something like that, an extended period of time, you're going to be able to use the abilities more often and generate more holy power, which means, you know, doing more damage with your Templar's Verdicts, Divine Storms. So that's why, so even though it was doing significantly less damage, it was helping those clashes out. And remember, because we've got downtime, you know, there's still going to be time to use those Hammer of Wrath. Because people thinking, well, low priority, why would you use it in the first place? So, but there is a bit of a subtlety with it, which I didn't talk about last week. Partly, I'm going to be completely honest, because I didn't fully get it myself. And even now, I'm still thinking, but technically, if you take Hammer of Wrath, and this apparently hasn't changed. Now, this is where I have to, again, defer to the theory crafters, the very small number of people who are building sims and making sure it all works, and actually doing the work of testing it out and making sure that we have, as a community, an accurate model for how the spec is working in the game. And you know, Sol Sacrum, Max, and Skeletor are the three key ones, that I get my information from. They're the key ones doing the work on it, and the ones talking to developers and all the rest of it. So during Avenging Wrath, if you've got Hammer of Wrath, then you use it as long as you're not going to overcap your holy power, of course, but you use it on high priority. However, during Execute, but if you haven't got Avenging Wrath, I mean, if it's Execute and you've still got Avenging Wrath, then it's still the same thing. But you're in the Execute phase, below 20% on the boss, but you don't have Avenging Wrath active. At that point, it's not such high priority. Blade of Justice and Judgment technically a higher priority. The reason for this is simply to be able to get off as many abilities as possible during your Avenging Wrath. But as those Hammers of Wrath as possible during it, because you're not going to have them available after that time. Because I mean, it's really towards the end of the Avenging Wrath duration. So you've got 20 seconds, you've got the last couple of seconds. If Hammer of Wrath would, because you've delayed its use earlier on, it might come off cooldown a second after, like in other words, the 21 seconds, when Avenging Wrath is going to stop at 20 seconds. So it'll be about to come off cooldown and then it'll be gone because Avenging Wrath has faded. And you've wasted that proportion of a Hammer of Wrath. Because you think about it, it had 1 second left to go. Let's say the cooldown is about 8 seconds now. I wish I'd looked it up again today. I've completely forgotten. But it's more than it was. But let's go with the old one as 6 seconds. So, 1 second to go. That basically means you've wasted 5/6 of a Hammer of Wrath, because it was 5/6 of the way there. So it's about trying to get as many of those in as possible, because your Blade of Justice, if you had to delay that by a second or two at that point, well, that's still going to be available when your your Avenging Wrath fades. So it's to do with that. However, then this brings into question your haste levels, because depending on your haste levels, that may or may not work out to be a sensible thing to do. But at that point, you're not only getting into something that's horrendously complex. We're certainly not going to suggest that you need to sim things to work out your own bloody APL during Avenging Wrath. But the difference it will make is not that great. In fact, I asked Skeletor what difference it makes between getting your priority right and not, and he said 1.15%. And also bear in mind, these sims are done with set characters with certain stats as well. You know, your relative balance of like haste and mastery, things like that can change things a little too. It's all quite finicky. Hopefully not too much. With the range of secondary stats that can realistically get, hopefully it won't change things significantly. But 1.15%. So for someone properly min-maxing it, okay, that matters. That 1.15% definitely matters. You know, especially as we've now, in my guild, for example, twice had a 0.0... Well, no, once we had a 0.0% wipe on Mythic Argus, so that 1% would have made a hell of a difference there. But even this week we had a 0.5% wipe. Well, even then. So it matters for min-maxes. But if you're not absolutely min-maxing, there's only so many players in the world that can properly do that. 1.15%, you know, as I like to say, that's the difference between choosing to scratch an itchy arse or wait till the end of the fight. That's what that is. It's not very much. I'm not saying just glibly toss it away, but think about how much extra effort and thinking is required to get that extra 1%. Is it really worth it? Especially if you get a bit befuddled as well and make a mess of it. But it may well be the case that when my Essentials guide comes out with all the rest of it, that I may well have to say, there's still, I mean, remember, a couple of months of tuning will have taken place before that happens, or at least a month of tuning. I will be, you know, at this point, it would have to say, prioritize Hammer of Wrath during Avenging Wrath, but not during Execute. You know, just to technically get the best out of it. So that's where it is with Hammer of Wrath. Now, I was talking with someone on Discord today about it as well, because there'll also be situational things. I'm going to say at this point as well, Blade of Wrath for a lot of situations may well just be the simplest talent to use. It's also worth bearing in mind, the talents are actually quite close together in value, relatively speaking. They're really close. Soul Sacred did some sims last week, and there was the difference between the best simming talents and the worst, and I mean the worst simming talents, was not very much at all. It's quite small. So people, for example, are looking at the situation going, I don't fancy Inquisition. Don't have to use Inquisition. If you're looking at, you know, I don't really like using Consecration. I don't like using Hammer of Wrath. Won't need to. Or Execution Sentence looks like a hassle. Don't use it. I mean, actually, at the moment, Zeal is the one that's doing better out of that one anyway. But they should be close enough that you can sort of choose. But then circumstances, remember, will always build some up and drop some down. Sorry about the noise outside, by the way. You may be able to hear a lawnmower. You know, it's bank holiday weekend here in the UK. We've got a lovely summer day. The sun's out. The birds are singing. Children are playing. It's nauseating, isn't it? Anyway, so, yeah, so the issue with those talents is, so Blade of Wrath will probably be less hassle to use in a lot of situations. But there are situations where Hammer of Wrath comes into its own. For example, I was saying, you know, those situations where the boss, basically everyone in the raid's dead, there's maybe a couple of people alive, you're kiting the boss around. We had one of those at 0.5% this week, and you know, all you can do from distance is judge and stuff like that. Hammer of Wrath is ranged as well, so you know, I remember killing bosses with basically the whole raid dead before, with running away from the boss with a cheeky Hammer of Wrath over my shoulder. In dungeons, again, a lot better as you move, you know, lots of heavy movement situations. You can see something on low health. You might be attacking something on higher health, see something on low health, switch to it, Hammer of Wrath, bang. Once your Hammer of, you know, when that's on cooldown, turn to the other one that's on higher health. When your Hammer of Wrath comes back off cooldown, switch to the low target one again, bang, throw it again. There's lots of situations where Hammer of Wrath is going to be quite useful. But where it's not going to be an obvious benefit, it might be less hassle just to use Blade of Wrath or something like that. Right, questions. This is going on for quite a while now. So, first question I had, I'm just going to read these out. I did answer quite a lot of these, but I'm going to go through as well for people who didn't read the comments. It says, is it worth if you take Inquisition and Execution Sentence to aim and get a finisher with the Execution Sentence and Judgment debuffs for your opener, or would it be too slow if you aren't running Wake of Ashes? At this particular point, I mean, first of all, it's worth noting, I did sort of say this, if you take an Inquisition, you won't have Crusade, so you don't have to worry about ramping up a buff like we've got now with the Legion with Crusade. But in terms of, you know, using Judgment and the Execution Sentence buff on something, it works out with Sims. Apparently it's slightly better to do that. So use Execution Sentence to get the debuff on, then use Judgment, and then, you know, if you've got Holy Power available, which hopefully you will, because hopefully you'd have had 5 Holy Power before you use Execution Sentence, Judgment to generate another, and then Templar's Verdict, so that Templar's Verdict gets the benefit of the Judgment debuff and the Execution Sentence debuff. And I'm going to stop this and do this in a minute. Right, I think they've finished, so let's get on to the next one. So the next one says, would it be a large DPS loss to build to 5, then Crusade, Justicar's Vengeance, Wake and Justicar's Vengeance to max Crusade in 3 globals? Is it better to build it slower with TV over time? Always with TV over time. Like I've sort of said before, Justicar's Vengeance, don't use it for damage. Use it only for healing, never damage. I know, and people, we've had this in Legion as well. It's not even useful in Legion to do this. People think, well, you know, Justicar's Vengeance, it allows me to spend 5 Holy Power at once, and is it quicker to go through? In terms of the damage you're getting from that, it doesn't actually work out as a damage increase. In fact, it's a damage loss, really. So no, never use Justicar's Vengeance for the purposes of damage. I mean, you know, if you've got Divine Purpose and you're out in the world and you happen to have taken Justicar's Vengeance, even though I would take Word of Glory personally, but you've got a stunned mob and it's a DP proc you're going to use on it, okay, theoretically in that situation, Justicar's Vengeance, use that. But generally speaking, it's not a damage thing. It's not going to be a damage thing for raiding, certainly. Next one, it says, so with changes to Mastery, does that mean we'll lean towards flat-out Mastery haste stacking for BFA instead of the Lazy Susan approach in Legion? I know what a Lazy Susan is, but I don't really get the context of that one. However, no, not necessarily. I don't know where secondary stats are going to end up when it goes live. I don't know. All I know is the last time someone told me how they seem to be simming, Mastery was actually looking very bad. I think the issue is, if we look at the breakdown of our damage, that Blade of Justice, which does a significant amount of damage, is physical and therefore not buffed by our Mastery. Our white hits are going to do a much greater proportion of our damage than they have done in the past. That's obviously not buffed at all. You know, Crusader Strike is not buffed by our Mastery either. So we've got a significant proportion of our damage not buffed by our Mastery, although, you know, it's a much improved form of Mastery. I mean, you know, I personally prefer it. I think a lot of Rets did. No Ret was very happy with our Legion Mastery at all. It had a lot of negative feedback and still didn't seem to make any difference. So, but yeah, so at the moment, Mastery is just not simming that well. It could easily be tweaked if Blizzard look at it and think, well, we want Mastery to be valuable. There's a few things they could do. The easiest thing to do is just to reduce the amount of Mastery rating we need for like 1% Mastery or something like that. So it's easily tweaked. Obviously, I imagine what Blizzard want to do, because it sort of worked with Rets in Legion, is to try and have the secondary stats very close to each other. So, you know, the relative strength changes depending on how much you have of each one. So if you start getting ahead with one, actually it starts to lose its value and maybe you need to catch up with something else. But I couldn't say at the moment because tuning hasn't even started yet. It's very, very close now, but it hasn't started yet. Even when I do the Essentials Guide, I don't think I'd be able to be definitive about it, because this is the sort of thing that can change all the time. It's going to be a classic case of Legion. That effectively, it's sim it. You know, is a piece of gear better for me or not? Sim it. What enchant should I use? you know, because there are still some secondary stat and chance we can get for like ring and stuff. Sim it is how it's going to work out. There was another comment here. It's saying it feels like we've gone from too simple a talent choice and rotation, referring to Legion. No talent choice at all at the moment, have we? It's Legion's been a funny one for talents because even though some talents have come and gone in usefulness, so if you look at, you know, our talents in Legion, at a certain point, quite a lot of them have had some use. Some of them are completely useless, not really acceptable. But there's still been situations under which, you know, you'll use this. So at the moment, you know, we're going to have, you know, Final Verdict, really. Greater Judgment, as long as we've got at least our 2 set tier 21 bonus. We're going to have, you know, Blade of Wrath. We're going to have Crusade. We're just going to take those. And it, you know, and it's like, so what would we take for a single target raid boss? Well, we would take those. Okay, what do we do where there's some AoE to be done? And we'll take those. All right. What about in a dungeon? Yeah, we'll take those. Oh, okay. What about when we're soloing? Yeah, the same ones. So we've gone from that to a situation where not only are those slightly different situations going to mean different talent combinations. So actually, I'm going to be using my tomes. I'm going to need to stock up on tomes in a way that I've got like 8 or so tomes in my bag at the moment. Can't remember the last time I used one. But certainly, you know, I'm not likely to get through those. They're going to last me easily till... In fact, I'll probably have some left out of that lot when BFA launches. So, but also, I think there can be more choice. So some people say they don't like a particular talent. Like, you know, I think realistically, you are going to be able to choose which one you want. Like I've said before, different circumstances are bound to increase the relative values of the talents. But it's so small, the difference between them. And obviously, you know, at the moment, okay, there's some that are a little bit out. But just the way they work means that it's possible to balance them as well. And that's the most important thing. So next one here was someone saying, I honestly hope that Hammer of Wrath will actually be worth taking over Blade of Wrath. Right now I feel that Blade of Wrath resetting my Blade of Justice for more HP seems more logical than a talent that only works in certain situations. Absolutely, and like I said before, I think Blade of Wrath could actually be the more straightforward one to take for a lot of situations. If you've got, I mean, if there's a boss that say starts off at like 30% health, you know, occasionally they throw these ones in, don't they? So you're going to be in execute range, in other words, for a very, very high proportion of the fight. Or even if it's just a boss where the execute phase is the crucial part, let's say like Mythic Argus at the moment, or indeed Argus on any difficulty, where you've got this panic phase at the end of a fight where you need to kill it ASAP. You know, Hammer of Wrath is obviously going to shine in that situation. But, you know, Blade of Wrath for a lot of situations, and certainly if people just don't want the hassle of Hammer of Wrath, and it may not be that much of a hassle when the dust settled, then I really don't think people are going to be losing out by taking Blade of Wrath over Hammer of Wrath the way it's looking at the moment. Because, you know, I know a lot of people when you're looking at sims of these talents and they just go for the top one. But sometimes you have to look at the difference. And if the difference is minor, then you've actually got to think to yourself, it's actually possible to do more DPS with one lower down the list if you can use it or you enjoy using it more, or you can use it more optimally. Then that can actually be better. The same sort of thing is technically true at the moment, but there's much bigger gaps between the relative strength of different talent combinations in Legion. And then the final one, it says, do you want to build to 5 Holy Power initially for your Inquisition to start, with 2 ready to use the next spender sooner? No. Have to remember, Inquisition, not only is it a buff we're going to maintain, but as well as improving damage, it also increases our haste. So we want to use it as soon as possible, really. I mean, you know, I'm not saying use what, but we can easily generate 2 Holy Power, but, you know, even generate 3 very quickly and then use it, because then that extra haste means that those generators are coming off cooldown more quickly as well, and it's reducing our global cooldown, so we can fire off the next few abilities more quickly. So if we go in there and use a Blade of Justice and a Judgment, for example, Inquisition, remember we've got a couple of charges of Crusader Strike to be going on with. We may well have Wake of Ashes, we may well have Consecration, we may well, you know, be going straight into Avenging Wrath because we've got Hammer of Wrath. You know, we've got that, so we will still have builders to use. and the ones we've just used, Blade of Justice and Judgment, are coming off cooldown a bit more quickly because we've now got that extra, at the moment, 8% haste. That may change. You know, tuning can change the values of these things, of course. So there we go. That's quite a long one. Sorry for the interruption halfway through there. But, you know, 'tis the season for people to interrupt my recordings with their lawnmowers. I was just saying in Discord, I don't know why people can't just buy a goat. But anyway, they'll probably just get bleating through the window all the time. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you found it useful. If you do have any further comments, put them below. Obviously, there is going to come a point, probably in the next couple of weeks, when I do another live Ret Q&A. I'm still umming and ahhing about when's the best time to do that. But until then, I will keep bringing out Ret videos each week. I'm still going to be available on stream for people to come on and ask me questions, especially on the Friday evenings and the Saturday afternoons when I'm actually going to be streaming probably a Ret Paladin, but certainly streaming BFA. So come on and ask me questions there as well if you like. If you've enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe and share for further content. And until next time, I'll see you later and stay away from crap videos.